And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born, free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here in the bunker, in undisclosed location. In the spirit of Dick Cheney and Spiro Agnew ever, we ride out the coronavirus, as you can tell, in a nondescript, multi-story mill building somewhere in the Providence, Rhode Island area. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. And we've got our new sort of front end, if you will, in progress. The coalitionradionetwork.com, where you can watch this show in addition to our Facebook Live production. So we're going to cover some, I think, pretty interesting territory over the next hour or so. Joining me is someone who I regard as a close friend and a repeat offender here on the Coalition. He's been with us on Coalition 1.0, 2.0, and now Coalition 3.0. He is the executive director of the Libertarian Party. In the past, he's run highly aggressive, highly successful campaigns to be the state auditor for the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's run for a variety of, I believe, the United States Congress. And he brings a real politic perspective to both the operations of the party and the challenges we are facing right now. He is, of course, Dan Fishman. Dan, welcome to the Coalition.
Always a pleasure to be on with you, Pat.
All right, we can see you. You know, folks, this is our first week of operation. Gradually, over the last few days, we've been doing a sort of what they would call in the restaurant biz a soft opening. So if we have the occasional fluctuation in technology, just bear with us. We will work it through. But Dan, let's get right down to it. I'd like to cover a couple of areas tonight in the hour that we've got.
Sure.
First and foremost, we've got the challenge of petitioning. Secondly, what I'd really like to speak to tonight, if you will, is this unique challenge, dare I say, and I say this very carefully, opportunity. We are obviously in the midst of a terrible health crisis here in this country. And for tonight's purposes, I'm not going to really entertain any conversation about whether it's real or not. To me, it's very, very real. I have family members living in New York City. People are dying in New York City. We as a party and an organization, I believe, have moved well past the conspiracy theory and the conspiracy reality surrounding this situation. It's real. And people around the world are dying. So let's move past that tonight, but we want to talk about, on a philosophical level, the both challenges and, again, you can tell I'm cringing at using the word opportunity because of the health situation surrounding us. But ultimately, as a political organization that also doubles as a philosophy and triples, if you will, as trying to get people elected to office, there are clearly issues that are right within our philosophy that need to be discussed. So let's tackle first the practical realities. Here we are in the year 2020. Now, tomorrow night, first of all, Dan, there will be a Zoom teleconference for the party at large for folks who want to listen in and have a conversation with the LNC about the challenges of the convention. Give us a little feedback on that and how that's going to physically work.
So let me manage a little bit of expectations here. The meeting is for the LNC and people can listen.
Right.
Non-LNC members will not be able to contribute to the conversation. It's going to be an in-house conversation. And although I will be listening on, I don't anticipate that I will be asked to contribute to the conversation, although I am available, obviously, to do so. Fundamentally, this is what we know about the convention in Austin. In order to nominate a president, in order to elect a new LNC, we need to gather in person and vote together. That is the opinion of almost everybody who has read the bylaws. On the other hand, there is no exigent circumstance provision, which is an interesting thing because it implies that there is at least a possibility of the LNC coming together and saying, well, we need to have an exigent an emergency plan just in case something were to happen. So first we have to find a way to authorize an emergency plan. But in that context too, I also want to point out that our intention right now is that unless we are prohibited by law, libertarians will assemble in Austin, Texas, May 21st through May 25th, and we will nominate our presidential candidate. We will elect a new LNC. We will hang out and talk bylaws and platform and all the exciting things that we do. And then we'll get to the best part, which is to hang out with a bunch of other libertarians, because that really is, it's a joyous occasion for us to be together. So the meeting tomorrow is to talk about what we know, what we don't know, and I don't want to ruin the thunder of what we know, but the public postings that we've seen so far, and the last that I've heard, is that the city of Austin has said that we are still on. They do not anticipate being closed that weekend. So we are proceeding, and we don't really know what we'll be like. You are right. You talked about the fact we are in the midst of a unbeknownst catastrophe. We have never seen anything like this in our country. However, we actually have seen things like this in other countries. One of the reasons that South Korea is doing so well right now is because South Korea had an outbreak in 2015 of MERS, okay, which is also was a novel virus, a novel coronavirus. And so in many ways, it was very similar to this. And South Korea didn't feel like they did a good job. And MERS was nowhere near as contagious as corona. However, even in that situation, and I don't recall the exact number, but something like 256 people died, which is a big deal. But South Korea learned a lot on this is how we fight an outbreak of a virus. This is how we do it, et cetera. So that's why South Korea knew from day one, we have got to test and test and test. And that was a big deal for them because they learned what they had to do. So now when you look at the things and you consider the fact, right? So South Korea shares a border with North Korea. North Korea actually borders China. South Korea has a lot of trade with China. They have the opportunity to be incredibly infected, and they're not. If you look at the slopes, South Korea has done a much better job than anybody else. And the reason why is because they had to prep for this. Now, what's interesting about that is we're going to be the next South Korea because this is the new normal. And I don't mean the new normal as us sheltering in place. I mean, first there was SARS, then there was MERS, then there was this virus. In our new world of being incredibly interconnected, the ability to fly across the world in 6 to 12 hours, we are going to encounter this sort of thing again. And just like South Korea learned from MERS, the United States is going to learn from corona. And so the next time that something like this breaks out in a small little place in China, we will be cranking out the tests immediately. And, we can go into all sort of the wet markets and the origins of this sort of viruses and stuff like that. That is what it is. But in terms of the preparation that we have as a country for this sort of virus, we are going to be better prepared for the next one. So I hope that the new normal is that viruses, because the new normal, no matter what we do, is going to be that there are going to be viruses like this again. But what we'll do is we'll learn how to live with them. And if you think about it, if everybody had a test every day, right? You tested in the morning to find out whether or not you've got corona. And if you don't, you go to work and you take precautions, go home the next day, you test to see whether or not you got corona. You don't, you go to work again. That could be a livable path if we had cheap, readily available testing. And you know what makes cheap testing readily available? The free market. Absolutely. And people would buy that, right? I would happily pay $5 every day for a test that would allow me to go in and find out whether or not I have corona. And if we had a situation like that, life returns to a semblance of normal. Now, we're not going to go back to the way we used to. I mean, one of my favorite posts from a libertarian in the last week was, "It's not liberty unless I can press the elevator buttons with my tongue." Okay, we're probably not going back to that level of liberty. However,
I don't think we've been at that level of liberty in years. My mom would have, well, A hairbrush would have been involved if I'd licked the elevator with my tongue.
Yeah, well, exactly. But there are certainly a lot of people who, as we look at this and we look at what our new normal is going to be like, we don't really know. But what we do know is that we are going to adapt and overcome as long as we let the market do that, as long as government doesn't screw it up. And that's the critical thing about everything, right? So, Pat, unfortunately, you were kind enough to call me a good friend. One of the burdens that all my good friends have to deal with is that I tell the same story over and over and over again. So this time I'm going to tell the story that you've heard before, which is a story about Frederick Hayek and his book, The Fatal Conceit.
Well, I want you to hold that thought. I want you to hold that thought for just a second, because I want to neatly tie up in a bow the convention. It's fair to say that there is a group of people working literally, and because I speak to these people all the time, literally around the clock as conditions change by the moment. The notion that a month or 2 months out that we would have a solution when we're involved in an international pandemic is not appropriate. The solution will ultimately surface and resolve itself in probably realistically in the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the convention, as we have a clear handle, well, literally on everything. And everything is based on everything. This is, if you've ever seen those crazy dominoes videos, they come out of ironically the Far East. You will know that there are so many dominoes that can take place in this situation that it's not going to happen. We're going to know a couple of weeks beforehand. I'm with you. I'm optimistic that it's going to take place, but the term I use is wargaming, and I feel like the Convention Oversight Committee has done an incredible job of wargaming as information comes in, literally on a daily basis, each of the opportunities and each of the challenges they're going to face in pulling off the convention. So tomorrow night, I don't want to take their thunder either. They're going to do a great job of that. Now, I want to spend a lot of time on the philosophy, but I also want to address a challenge that we at the affiliate level are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and that is, of course, what is the bogeyman of the Libertarian Party? Of course, it's ballot access, and it's getting people on the ballot in a position where they can represent the party, where they can challenge a duopoly. It's a huge part of the daily operations, if you will, around the clock in the 4 years running up to the election, never mind the election, season in and of itself. So we've got concerns, and I give us a little bit of background of what some of the challenges that individual affiliates are facing and how National is helping out with language, legal help, lawyers, guns, and money, if you will.
So, as you know, in order to get on the ballot in all 50 states, there is a real drive that has to happen that the Libertarian Party at the national level has put a lot of effort into. What we do is we talk about which states we put effort into first, when obviously the states help us a great deal. For example, in your state of Rhode Island, we're going to need 1,000 signatures to get the presidential candidate on the ballot. In my home state of Maryland, we're going to need 10,000 valid signatures, which means we really need to gather 15,000 signatures to get the president on the ballot. Right. In order to do that, we normally go out and we petition. Now, it's actually a more complicated story than just Corona, because in the beginning, what happened was we were going out and we were trying to hire petitioners, as we usually do. The states can do what they can, but professional petitioners are really good at this. And we can take people, most libertarians are working other jobs, and so they don't have the ability to go out and gather signatures 8 hours a day. So we would hire people. However, Michael Bloomberg being in the race, he also needed signatures, and he needed campaign staff in every state, and he was a billionaire. So he was spending money like crazy. Normally, when we would hire people to gather signatures for us, we would hire them at between $3 and $4 an hour. Michael Bloomberg was paying $15 an hour for, not $15 an hour, $15 a signature for people to go out and gather signatures. And we were paying between $3 and $4 a signature. So already he's at 4 times or 5 times the going rate. So every signature that we'd ever used in the past, every petitioner, every signature gatherer that we'd ever used in the past said, sorry, Michael Bloomberg is offering us so much more money. We're going to go work for him. So we couldn't hire petitioners. So what we did was we put together a team, led by Apollo Pizzell, who's our election specialist from LPHQ. And we hired people from dedicated libertarians from around the country to come in. We set up, just like a regular campaign would do, rent a big house, everybody lives in the house, share expenses. The team goes out and they petition. And in the first month that they were going, and even though it was terrible weather, through February, our group gathered over 3,000 signatures in Maryland. But once Corona started spreading, when you go up to somebody with a clipboard and a pen and say, hey, would you be willing to sign? They're like, no, please don't touch me. Please stay away. Social distancing. And so we actually tried to adapt to that and said, well, how about, because as we saw petitions, signatures falling off rapidly, we said, well, how about I sign your name and, I'll say, this is Pat Ford's signature, Dan Fishman signing for Pat Ford. Because there are some states where we allow that, but that dried up very quickly too. And it became very clear that gathering signatures to get on the ballot is not going to work. And it's not just in Maryland. So in Illinois, where we need 42,000 signatures to get on the ballot, we need 25,000, but 42,000 will get us to 25,000 ballot. We're having the same thing. And of course now, shelter in place, no gathering, social distancing, all that stuff. It's essentially illegal to gather signatures in most places at this point in time. So we have 15 states where we need to get on the ballot. So what we are doing is we're having all of those state chairs write a letter to their Secretary of State, to their governor, and in places where there's a board of elections, like in Maryland, to them as well, saying, dear sir or madam, we are interested in public health. We are the Libertarian Party. We were on the ballot in all 50 states in 2016, including this state. In a normal circumstance, we would be able to gather enough signatures to get on the ballot again. However, this is not a normal circumstance. You don't want us going out and gathering signatures because it violates the idea of social distancing. So it is a public health hazard for us to go out and gather signatures. We would therefore ask that you waive the signature requirements this election cycle, knowing that we have demonstrated that we can get on the ballot in the past. I don't know how well that's going to work. I think that some states will. For example, my home state of Massachusetts, everybody has to petition. Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, and Greens. Those are the four major parties in Massachusetts. And they have to have their signatures done by June. So I'm not a Massachusetts resident anymore, so might be wrong in the day, but usually it's June. For Congress, it's 2,000 signatures, which means you got to collect at least 3,000. For Senate, it's 10,000 signatures, which means you got to collect at least 15,000. Republicans are not going to be able to do that in Massachusetts either. And frankly, I doubt whether or not the Democrats will be able to, although they have so much money, they could mail a petition to every person they wanted to. But I think that we have a legitimate chance of getting all petitioning waived, all petitioning requirements waived across the country. Now, I mean, in order to do that, we got get our ducks in the row. State chairs have to write letters. We've got an archive of them. If you are a petitioner or a candidate who's being burdened by the requirement to get signatures, we need you to tell us about that. lp.org/report. lp.org/report is where you say, I'm a candidate and I'm not able to gather my signatures. I'm a petitioner and I've been out petitioning, people won't sign. Or I'm somebody who wanted to work as a petitioner, but I'm afraid to do so because of Corona. Or I was afraid to sign a petition sheet because of Corona. All those things, we need to have affidavits for all of them. lp.org/reports where people record those. So we're building up this mountain of evidence so that we can then go to the governors and secretaries of state when they get back to us and say, look, we've got all these people who can't get on. Hopefully it's straightforward to them. But the problem, of course, is that it's politics. And when it gets to politics, nothing is straightforward, as we saw with this debacle of a spending bill that came through that's designed to provide relief to people who are, truly going to need relief in the country. And we can debate, the ethics of giving money to people and the problem with there being a $6 trillion in spending, but that would result in actually giving $6,000 to every person. However, instead, each person is only going to get about $1,200. because that's just government math, right? Part of what they're doing is their relief package includes $300,000 for the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm not sure how that works out. So, but the answer why it's all screwed up is because it's political. It's not about people, it's about power. And so for us, when we are petitioning to get on the ballot, the states really don't like that we do that. They don't like that libertarians participate in democracy because the old parties want democracy to be a closed party. However, we've done it. They deal with the fact that we are able to get on. So now, are they going to deal with it and say, you know what, this is what's equitable? The libertarians have always shown their ability to get on the ballot. We just have an unusual circumstance. Or are they going to fight us? And if they fight us, that means we're going to have to go to court. And we are ready for that. Oliver Hall is our counsel. Some generous libertarians have stepped up to help us prepare for that. That being said, lp.org/legal is a place that if you want to contribute money for, we're going to have to go to court in some places. lp.org/legal is a place where we will be able to do that. Now, the one other thing I want to talk about is the state that borders both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, Connecticut. The chair, Dan Reel, has a lawsuit going on there that's actually important to every libertarian across the country. In their lawsuit, they stated that if the Secretary of State allows people to register online, that indicates that they know that they can validate who a person is online. So if they can validate who a person is online enough to let them register to vote, why wouldn't they allow people to sign petitions online? That's where we want to go with this. That's the long range goal, is that essentially we end all petitioning except for online petitioning going forward in the future. That'll be a big deal. That will change American democracy because right now, the old parties really try to restrict access to the ballot. It is a tremendous burden on a candidate, if you are not a Republican or Democrat, to get on the ballot. In Massachusetts, and this is for a small little race, in 2014, a candidate named Evan Falchuk spent in 2014, he spent a small fortune to run for governor and to get 3.3% to get on the ballot, to create a major party, which meant that he had ballot access. That meant that he could run candidates. He was a major, their party was called the United Independence Party. The premise of it, I really liked a lot. It was, Republicans and Democrats run everything in Massachusetts. Let's take all the independents in Massachusetts, libertarians, Greens, Pirate Party. We have a lot of different smaller parties as well in Massachusetts. Combine them all, and everybody who's not a Republican or Democrat should be in the United Independence Party, and then we can pool our resources to run people against the duopoly. And if we have a case where a Republican, where a Libertarian and a Green want to run for the same office, then we'll have an honest to God primary. And that makes a tremendous amount of sense. So I was pretty excited about that. However, when we got to the reality of it, in 2016, none of the candidates that the United Independent Party put forward were capable of getting on the ballot, except for me. Evan Falchuk, who was the guy, came and he said, Dan, we're in trouble. None of our candidates are capable of getting on the ballot. I know you have the capacity to do it. Will you get on the ballot? And so I did get on the ballot as United Independent candidate, but I am a very experienced candidate and petitioner. And so I ran for that reason, and it worked, but then the United Independent Party fell away. Republicans and Democrats have kept a lock on the ballot, right? It's so difficult for a candidate to get on to run against them. And very few people do it twice. And a great example of that is that in the history of the United States, only 3 parties have ever had full 50-state presidential ballot access in consecutive elections. The Republicans, the Democrats, and the Libertarians. The Reform Party never did it. They had 50-state ballot access once. They never got it back again. The Greens have never had 50-state ballot access. We are the only one besides the Republicans and the Democrats to do that. We are, quite truly, America's third party. And the difficulty behind that means that no party really has staying power because they don't run a candidate again and again and again. And in fact, When we were so successful in 2004, well, in 2000 and 2004, right? 2000, we get 1% of the vote. It's the most successful libertarian campaign until Gary Johnson. States responded by closing down the ballot, by making these draconian ballot access rules, and we lost 50 state ballot access. So we didn't have it in 2008, and we didn't have it in 2012, even with Gary Johnson running. But in 2016, we put a lot of effort in. The LNC, libertarians combined, standing up together. We did everything we could to make sure that we would get 50 state ballot access, and we did it. And that was awesome. It was a big deal. 50 state ballot access is saying we are serious. Now, the way that we tell people that we're really serious is we maintain 50 state ballot access in consecutive elections. So we are starting that streak again. Now, here we've got this challenge. There is, in my opinion, right now, no way to gather enough signatures to get a presidential candidate on the ballot in states where we have to gather signatures because of the corona lockdown. So it is important in this situation that we say, look, rules are rules, fair is fair. But if you tell candidates, and it's not just libertarians, right? It's Republicans and Democrats as well in Massachusetts and New York and a lot of states where you have to petition. You don't want those candidates going door to door with a piece of paper that's infectious, because paper is very infectious. Corona can be transmitted with a piece of paper. You don't want people to be spreading the virus, to be out petitioning. So it's critically important that the states get our message, we get our ducks in a row, and in defense of democracy, ending the monopoly of the ballot, that we are granted relief. And so that's what our big effort is. And that's really been my major focus over the last 5-6 days, is getting all of that in order so that we can go to a lawsuit if we have to, but also that we can petition, we can ask all the governors, all the people who are in charge, say, look, this is a special circumstance. You should let us on the ballot.
Given the extreme measures that the duopoly has gone to prevent the quote unquote disenfranchisement of so many different groups that, if you will, pledge fealty to them, it would be darkly ironic if all of a sudden they've decided, and we know they want to, but if they actually had the, to come out in public and say, well, no, you just don't matter. And the term that I'd like to use, I've had the opportunity a couple times recently to be on TV, and the term I love to use is disenfranchisement, because it's not just libertarians who are being disenfranchised. It's really any grassroots political organization. It's really every ethnic group. It's every religious group. It's literally every quote-unquote interest group is being disenfranchised from active participation in the political system here in the United States, other than the Republicans and Democrats. They've managed to privatize a very public institution at, ironically, great expense to the taxpayer. So there are words and language to use when you debate people, because ultimately we'll get from certain quarters the same infuriating nonsense about how, you guys are just fill in the blanks. I won't even give voice to it. Just fill in the blanks. We all know what they'll say. But at the same time, we have to look at 2016 and mind the successes of that, which is 50 state ballot access, and millions of Americans, despite every trick they could play, voted for Gary Johnson. They simply did. It's a fact. And the nation is, as a nation, intent clearly on moving away from a duopoly. They demand it, particularly given the prominence of independent votes. So let's use this aggressively for what it represents, which is finally, between the combination of Dan Uriel and the Connecticut Party's heroic efforts and the exigencies of the coronavirus, to let's crush petitioning. Let's make it really something that's an archaic retrospective of the 20th century. It's time.
And the important thing is, it's not just libertarians in this case, right? We were talking about it for Greens and for everybody else, because the most American thing we can do in an election is to have as many possible candidates that represent the people. The old parties have tried to keep us off. They've tried to keep everybody off except for them. It's this devil's bargain. So we are fighting for everybody here.
If you're just joining me, Dan Fishman is the executive director of the Libertarian Party. Got quite the comprehensive political background. He's been a candidate at the local, the state, and the federal level. He's the first libertarian I've ever met who managed to gain the endorsement of the Boston Globe. Yes, you heard that right. The endorsement of the Boston Globe. And at the same time, now has taken that realpolitik experience to the national level and is driving hard our party to move past these barriers to entry. If this is your first time joining us, we are the Coalition. And as we always say, we're loud and proud. We're outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. My name is Pat Ford. I'm chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. This is an independent effort of that. Let me be clear, but I leverage whatever I can to move the liberty movement forward. And this is just one example of that. There's a couple of great indie media operations, Liberty RI, here in Rhode Island, that operate independently of the party, but at the same time clearly have liberty and the Libertarian Party in its heart. We are just moved to a new station. If I bear with me, if some of the tech is a little fluky, Joel, our producer, has done an astonishing job, literally in the middle of a semi-shutdown of society here in Rhode Island, to get this up and running. And we look forward in the coming weeks, months, to having libertarian candidates routinely appear on these airwaves, routinely given the opportunity to invoke their message and to spread liberty where and whenever possible. It is the mantra here in Rhode Island that, given the, let's say, reticence of local media and national media to cover the Libertarian Party, well, let's not wait for them. They'll come along, and they're moving. They're figuring us out. But at the same time, let's develop local voices on our own that we can promote the most American of virtues. Dan, thanks again for joining me. I know these are challenging times. By the way, anecdotally, is the party office open? What is the state of free movement, if you will,
Sure.
in DC?
So in my area, in the DMV, so I live in Maryland, but I am a 30-minute drive from LPHQ, which is in Alexandria, Virginia. We do not have a shelter-in-place order. However, we have a everything is closed and you shouldn't go out order. And that's essentially the way it is. Schools are closed throughout this area that we call the DMV. LPHQ, however, is open. We are, through the variety of staff, we are maintaining a skeleton crew. I am self-isolating right now. I'm a little worried because I was at the LP Pennsylvania convention 2 weeks ago, and then not last weekend, but 9 days ago, I was at LP Virginia and LP Maryland. Adam Kokesh was at the LP Pennsylvania, and he's self-reporting as having corona. Other people at the nobody at the Maryland convention I know, but people at the Virginia convention have also reported. So I am now 10 days removed from the Virginia convention. I feel fine. We practiced pretty good convention hygiene at Virginia, good convention hygiene in Maryland. Pennsylvania, we were just all hugging each other, and it really wasn't great, especially considering the fact that we really have to protect ourselves, because if it's not for the Libertarian Party now, we are screwed. The advancing powers of government right now see this as an opportunity, right? You saw the chief whip said this is a tremendous opportunity. What bastards? I don't know if I can say that on your radio show, but
yeah, you can,
what
Dan,
bastards,
you can say anything
right?
you want. Absolutely.
All right.
Never let a crisis go to waste.
All right. Well, exactly. Right. That's exactly it. Right. Never let a crisis go to waste. Their chance to expand their rule because they want to govern us, right? It's the most nauseating thing to see them say that this opportunity, right, this terrible thing that has befallen the country is an opportunity for them. Because what do they really want to do? They want to lead us. They want to rule us. They want to govern us. And that's what they see out of this, is that, oh, here's our chance to consolidate power. When in reality, if they would set us free, we could save ourselves. And everybody knows that, right? I mean, the fact that just south of where I live, in North Carolina, is where the test is made that they were using in China, that they were using in Korea. We were talking earlier about the importance of testing. So this bioscience company in North Carolina is cranking out the test before Corona is even in the United States, and they're selling it to China and they're selling it to Korea, and they can't sell it in the United States because the FDA says no, it's not approved. How insane is that, right? That we are restricted from the thing that, this is what I said. This is going to be the new normal. This is not the last virus that's coming through. You look at what happened in Asia, okay? SARS, MERS, now Corona, okay? Those didn't really expand into us. Corona did. There's going to be more viruses that are going to come out of this, that are going to come out of, it's going to be the wet markets or whatever, wherever these viruses are going to generate, they're going to come and they're going to spread, and this is going to be our new normal. We are going to have viruses like this every 5 years or so. Dealing with it, South Korea this time, because they did such a good job. Sorry, go ahead, Pat.
No, I was going to say let's talk about proof of concept, because ultimately, every single movement by government in the last 21 days to resolve and ameliorate the conditions that are being inflicted upon American citizens has been libertarian in nature. It's been about rolling back regulations. It's been about cutting taxes. It's been about trying to find under the most difficult circumstances, even at hellish People's Republic of Rhode Island, they're finding new ways to allow business to survive and try and regain their footing. Everything about it. There are people out there who Dan, you've seen the posts. Libertarians. This is the death of the libertarian movement. Dan, why is it not only not the death of the libertarian movement? Tell me why you think that the libertarian movement has never been more important in this nation's history because of all these agencies.
Because the thing that's happening is every solution that's happened so far is actually a rolling back of governmental power. Okay, allowing testing from things that the FDA haven't necessarily approved, that is a rollback. Okay. Trucks right now going across the country are allowed to speed. As long as they're driving safely, they can speed on the interstate so that they can get supplies from point A to point B more cheaply, more efficiently. So we're cranking up our infrastructure. Businesses are not going out of business like restaurants because they are able to deliver alcohol, right? Delivery alcohol, right? What a great idea. How is it that it's safe now, but wasn't safe beforehand? And the answer is there's no difference at all. It's just that government had this power beforehand and they used it. They used it to, either benefit businesses, cronyism, whatever it was. But all these cases where you see government restrictions being rolled back, it's really helping the people. And hopefully we never let government take those powers back. Okay, that's certainly what happened in other cases where we've legalized cannabis, right? That never came back. Cannabis is legal. Well, not in Maryland, but Maryland has medical, but we don't have recreational yet. But we're working on it. In all these places, though, it's really important to recognize the fact that it's freedom, people acting on their own. And that's the other thing about it. So, this is the whole Hayek thing that I was going to get into, right? 100 people trying to find a way to make money in this economy is better than the government figuring out one way for us to live. Everybody finding out their own way to live. Some of us are going to be wrong. Some of us are going to be right. But eventually we're going to figure out how we live with this. But it's the wide variety of people trying a bunch of different things that's going to be the thing that leads to finding what our life is like. It is the marketplace of ideas that distinguishes us as Americans. And I'm not a person who believes in American exceptionalism. I don't believe that we as a country, I don't believe that Americans are exceptional because we're Americans. I believe that America is exceptional because we allow people to be, we are the freest country in the world. I am not content with that because I don't want to be the freest. I want to be free. But as the freest country in the world, with people able to bring new ideas to market, people trying to find a way to provide service, because in the United States, right, I want to find a way to serve society, to serve humanity. Because in the United States, if I can serve society, if I can serve humanity, society's going to pay me for that. And that's great. We want all these people competing to find different ways to serve society so that society will pay them. And that's the thing that's going to get us out of this. It's not going to be government's monolithic one-size-fits-all rule. I mean, excuse me, if you look and think about what's happened with our healthcare system, the one-size-fit-all, Everybody agrees that's terrible. Okay, when we had independent states with different solutions, you can argue whether you like public health care or not, but different states with different public health care solutions, Massachusetts had one, Tennessee had one, other states had one, they were at least competing and innovating to find new ways to serve the public with their healthcare thing. When we implemented the Affordable Care Act at a federal level, we ended all innovation in the idea of public health, which is terrible. Okay, the same thing's happening right now, except in reverse. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do I get paid? So for example, in downtown DC, there's a lot of bars that were closed because they're not essential businesses. However, markets are open. So what they're doing is they're ordering supplies, they're selling limes and lemons, things that bars have anyway. But you want citrus fruit, and they add some other things in there. And then they're also selling prepackaged meals, stuff like that. People are innovating their way out of this. We just have to let them do that.
Dan, what happens if in a few months from now, and to me this has the potential for the most stunning change of all, millions of American children right now are being taught in radically different methods that are evolving literally as we speak right now in different parts around the country. Technology companies are jumping in crazily to implement new, quick, and real-time solutions so that our children can continue their education. If we wake up 4 or 5 months ago and realize that the single biggest fraud perpetrated on the American public was the fact that we had to have bricks and mortar buildings built by government, run by government, with a barrier to entry to any of these advances that we are seeing literally today, tomorrow, by Friday, by next Monday, education in America will be better. What happens to the entire industrial educational system in this nation? My God, the opportunity here.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. So, I am a former school teacher. I taught special education for 7 years. And there's no question that so many people are recognizing right now that, wow, the way we were doing education before was really inefficient. You look at people as they view their children learning cooperatively with other children online, but they have resources, they're at home. A lot of people comment too on how much like our home individual lives have changed. People look at what's happening now, what the capacity is for people to learn and to learn from their homes. And a lot of people are not going to go back to traditional brick and mortar education. And it's an interesting thing because, there's a political philosophy that believes much more in equality than liberty. That's not me. I believe a lot more in liberty. Liberty and equality are on a balanced scale. The more liberty I have, the less equality there is. Or rather, I guess it's the other way around, right? Because if I have a lot of liberty, I'm going to use my liberty to improve myself and to not be unequal. On the other hand, if we have a tremendous amount, we have absolute equality, then there is no liberty, right? Because if you have absolute equality, nobody is allowed to use their liberty to become unequal. So it's really important that we understand that balance between liberty and equality. And as more people are going to look to homeschooling as a permanent solution, or schooling from home, right? You can attend school from home, and maybe it's in some sort of cooperative thing. There's a teacher online, whatever it is. Doing that is going to be a big deal. The important thing about that is that when we make those changes, that's a good thing for society because people recognize the fact education doesn't have to come from the state. And whatever else you want to say about public education, okay, and I am a product of public education. Okay, I went to public school I spent 4 years in a private school, so 13 years because I did a postgraduate year. I spent 9 years in public schools. Awesome. I'm happy for the experience. I'm happy to have gone to school and shared time with the general public. And then I went to state universities. My last degree was from the University of Massachusetts. I believe that there is a benefit to an educational system that is available to everybody. I wish that it weren't funded by taxes collected by force. But if you were to ask me to voluntarily contribute to a school system in my area, I would certainly do so. I think there's something to that. However, when the state runs the school system, when anybody runs the school system that is connected to politics, It is warped. Okay, you see a lot of teachers right now who are members of teachers unions, and they pass laws so that only members of teachers unions can teach. Members of teachers unions are almost universally members of the Democratic Party. That's not an equitable system for teaching, because if the people have a political agenda, how do they keep themselves out of how do they keep those politics out of what they're teaching? And the problem is that they can't. We have a lot of people who spend time, they're dedicated teachers. And I say this because I was a school teacher and I worked with a lot of these people. They're dedicated teachers, but they are so entrenched in one-sided philosophy and in a government-led philosophy, because they work at government schools, that they teach government-based solutions, and that's it. And they don't mean to do it. They don't mean to be pushing their political agenda, but they are pushing it because of the fact that that's what they know. The famous phrase: if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you are a person of government, if you are a person in government, then your solution is always going to be government. And most of the schools that are out there are run by the government, and so they teach government-based solutions. That's been hurting us for a long time. But as people wake up in this crisis, and we have education that is not based in government, people start to realize, wow, there really are other ways out there. And the other thing that's happening here is people are finding that they are not as reliant upon government as they thought they were. So, this is a terrible tragedy. What's happening, I don't know how many people are going to die in the United States. I got no idea. I hope that it is a very small number, but I fear it's going to be much larger than we think. In that situation, what we're learning is that there is no panacea. There is no cure-all. There is no solution to a world that comes from just one solution. And government gives you one solution. And government doesn't like competitions for solution. When in reality, we know that competition is what brings out excellence, right? We don't have excellent cars now. So I was talking to a millennial about this the other day, and they're like, oh, I don't really care what kind of car I get because it's going to be fine. It didn't used to be that way.
No,
Dave,
not at all.
Pat, you and I grew up in an era when there were a lot of cars that broke down because they were just terrible. But
they were unsafe at any speed.
Yep. Competition, however, has made the car industry generally excellent by competing against themselves. It's only when there's no competition that people get complacent. And that's the problem with government, is that government doesn't have any competition, and it works to actively eliminate competition. So what we do now is we see this thing where government can't get to us to provide a lot of services, and we're having to provide for ourselves. And we find out, hey, we can do it okay.
I always say that the free market is a mechanism by which the individual can reach their full human potential. Ultimately, individuals operating for personal gain, yes, I said it, for personal gain, not greed, personal gain, operate at a higher level of innovation that they then use to improve the lives of others, many of whom they'll never even meet. Their success often leads to financial success, which then allows them the opportunity to invest in other people's innovation. It's really that simple, isn't it, Dan?
It is. And the thing is that given a chance, people will innovate. Given a reason not to, a disincentive to innovate, which is what government does in most markets, then they don't know what to do. People will try to find some other way to do it. And that's a shame, because we could be bringing innovation into all of these new markets right now. But the problem is, fundamentally, when your business becomes successful, you look at the game because it's a formula. And the game is, oh, my business has become successful. How do I stay successful? How do I stop people from innovating against me? Because that allows me to stay in power. Well, the way that you do that is you ask your local form of government to create a barrier of entry so that somebody else can't compete against you. Big businesses don't want competition. And the way the system is set up, government can prevent competition. So big businesses give money to governments to create rules, right? licensing fees, regulations, things that make it harder for somebody to innovate in the field. This is another thing I was talking about with millennials who don't remember what taxis used to be like. They only know taxis in the era of Uber. And they're like, taxis are awesome. They're clean. They're wonderful. Taxis didn't used to be like that. Taxis used to be exactly. Right. I can't even imagine how terrible Corona would be right now if we were living in the modern taxi cab era, if we had taxi cabs from 20 years ago.
Listen, I'm convinced Corona came from I think Corona may have come from some of those taxi cabs.
Exactly right.
I think, by the way, I love your reaction to this. The single biggest abomination perpetrated on the American public in terms of medical care was something called the Certificate of Need. And the Certificate of Need, was a extra legal authority would decide what hospitals are allowed to build into their systems and what they're not. Now, as opposed to allowing the profit, there I said it again, Dan, that profit thing, to drive the decision as to what the hospital could use, you had larger hospitals creating barriers to entry for smaller hospitals who might have had the financing or just the desire to enter new markets, again, creating competition, oh my God, which would then drive down prices. It's not up to us as a government or as a people to ensure Delta Airlines profit this week. It's not up to us to ensure a hospital chain's profit. That's not our job. That's the market's job. Should they fail, other people will provide similar services at a higher level for perhaps less money. That's how the free market works. And yes, there are casualties, and nice people get hurt, and businesses go under, and they fail because they have to fail. And my biggest, because now I want to segue into the conversation of the atrocity again that was dropped on our lap. Right? The notion that we are too big to fail and that there is no longer a moral hazard to failure is, I believe, corrupting and destroying our economy at a level that I don't think people fully understand. Let's talk about the bailout. For the love of God, I don't even know where to begin. Run with it, buddy.
First of all, you used a phrase that I wish that I had invented. I'm going to take credit for going forward in the future. But the fact that there has to be moral hazard to failure, that is a critical element to our society, because if there is no penalty for failure, we promote failing ideas. And that's terrible for everybody, right? The ideas that fail should actually fail. And so I hope that fundamentally we are going to have a system where we recognize the fact that failure isn't terrible. Failure is, in fact, a necessary part of the way that we do things, because we need to have people try a lot of different things so that we can find out which one is best. And if you try a lot of different things, one or two of them will succeed and lots of them will fail. So accepting that moral hazard for failure and accepting that as part of the normal business cycle, that is a critical thing that we have to do. Now, to that end, this bailout is disastrous because it actually is getting rid of a lot of the moral hazard, because there are companies now that are going to get checks, that are going to get incentives to stay in business that would have failed and should have failed. We are promoting failure by bailing out these companies. Okay, government wants to do something. I accept the fact that libertarians haven't won enough elections. We don't get to stop government from doing things right now, but we can at least say, please, government, try to do the things that make sense. Giving money to corporations, giving money to other aspects of government, right? In this stimulus plan is money for the House of Representatives as well. Giving money to businesses doesn't make any sense. Give money to customers and let the customers do business. Let the market choose which are the successful businesses. Now, some businesses are going to fail. Some businesses are going to fail regardless of the bailout. Why are we giving money to businesses when we don't know who's going to fail and who's going to succeed? That's a disastrous idea. So instead, what we want to do is have a system where we give money to the people who can at least vote on what they think is the best idea. If you give money to the people, they're going to spend it on the things that make the most sense right now.
Let me jump in. The way you give them money is not to write $600 or $1,200 checks that are income contingent and will cost as much to produce the very check they're printed on as is the money they're giving. The way to give them money is simply not to have taken it in the first place.
Right. No, and I agree with that 100%. And that's, a critical, well, it would have been great if we could have done that, right? We couldn't stop that. Can't stop the government from having taken this money. But I agree with you too, that that's something that we could do very easily, is say, you know what, instead of us giving money, let's just say nobody owes any income tax for 2019. No corporate income tax, no federal income tax. You don't owe any income tax at all. That's a really good idea. It puts money in people's pockets immediately. People who haven't paid their taxes, they don't have to write those giant checks. It gets money out there, and it's not government picking winners or losers in businesses. Right. It's just saying no taxes. That's the best thing about it, because whenever the government gets involved, it becomes political. It's a political agenda. We shouldn't be doing that with people's lives right now. We shouldn't be taking money away, because every money that goes to a corporation that's going to fail, that money is going to be not spent on a person. That's money that's spent on a corporation. Why are we giving money to corporations? Why are we giving money to big business? Don't give any money. That's not the purpose of government. The purpose of government is not to take taxpayer money and to give it to businesses. You can make an argument that, okay, at least giving the money back to other taxpayers is a better solution, because there are people who are struggling. This is the way government thinks that they're going to solve things right now. Fine. It's not the way I wish they do it, but stop taking the money in the first place. Don't try to pick winners out of this economy that is, going to massively shift, because the government has no idea who's going to win. So they're just wasting money, and they know they're wasting money. That's the worst thing about it. The government people who are giving this money are not, they know that they're giving it to businesses that are going to fail. And the ratio is terrible too, right? It's going to be $6 trillion. It's going to end up being essentially, it's going to cost us $6,000, right, for this bailout bill. But you're only going to get $1,200. So that's terrible. I mean, that's just really bad math. It's the padding, right? It used to be, right. That's exactly what it is that they are, pushing this off into the future. And in reality, though, it's a bad deal. If they said, okay, it's just going to cost $6,000 for every person, so here's $6,000, we would all be better off with that. $6,000 in the hands of every taxpayer, that's a much better deal than the $1,200 that they're giving us and the $6,000 of debt that we're accumulating. Let's find a way. I mean, it's very frustrating.
I don't know where this ends, because, you talked about millennials, and the problem is that we are losing sight of the notion that at some point in time, economics and the rules of economics are inviolable. They can be stretched, they can be tortured, but ultimately, to use a cliche, the piper will be paid. And so at a certain point, how much further can we continue to print ourselves out of the catastrophe du jour? We still haven't even dealt, and let's put this in perspective, as bad as this is, and it's bad, we still have waiting in the wings for us the student loan crisis. My biggest problem with all of this is that you've got progressives saying, listen, it works. We'll print money to get us out of that bubble, and we'll print money to get us out of the next bubble, and the pension crisis, and this crisis, and that crisis. We'll just continue to print money. At what point in time does that just finally blow up? And I think we're perilously close to that.
We are. The thing that bothers me the most is that so few people have an understanding of the difference between wealth, value, and currency. Okay, your wealth is only two things ever. It is your health and your time, and that's it. And if you have those things, you have the ability to do other stuff. Value is something that you can acquire. A thing of value doesn't lose value at any point in time. So a piece of gold is a piece of gold always, right? A piece of land is a piece of land always. It used to be that you would use your wealth, your health, and your time, your ability to work and labor to earn things of value. But as our economy became more complicated, we said, okay, we need to exchange things of value and our wealth, our labor, but they have different values. Okay, I'm a software engineer. A software engineer, I charge $300 an hour to work. Okay, I'm totally worth that. On the other hand, when I sing karaoke, that's terrible. Okay, however, I'm going to give an example here. I'm going to call one out for the kids, right? When Justin Bieber sings, right, he gets paid millions of dollars to sing, but he probably can't write code for beans. Okay, same labor, fundamentally different laborers. You have to pay them a different amount. The way that we resolve that is we said, okay, we're going to have currency. Currency is the thing that allows us to equitably decide what people get paid for different things. And you can use currency to acquire things of value. You can use currency to compensate people for labor, whatever it is. But currency is just currency. It itself is not worth anything. You can't eat it. You can't build a house out of it. Currency is just currency. And so when the government prints money, and the best example that I can give of this is the easing. I can't even think of the first word.
Quantitative easing. The QE 1, 2, 3, and now 4 or 5.
Exactly. Where the government was spending $48 billion a month in buying stock. Now they were just printing that money, right? They were making it up. But because they were buying it, stocks increased in value. Now, the big companies of our era on the stock market, right? Ford, General Electric, 3M, those companies didn't become worth more. They weren't more valuable because they were the same company. They had the same resources. However, they became worth more in currency because the government was buying their stock. So what happened is that Ford is still Ford. But when the government prints more currency, now instead of it being worth $20 a share, it's now worth $30 a share. What that means is that if you have $20, right, it used to be that $20 was worth one share of Ford. But now, if you have $20, it's not worth one share of Ford anymore. So actually you, a person who has currency, you have lost money. And that's the big thing that is happening right now, is that quantitative easing was a transfer of wealth from the currency holding class to the stock holding class. And that was terrible, right? There's a lot of middle class people lost a tremendous amount of money. The poor actually weren't hurt by that particularly because they didn't have a lot of currency. But the middle class did. They had a lot of money in banks. The people who owned stocks became very wealthy. And that's what's going to happen again because the government is printing money.
Right. If you look at the run-up before Corona, when the Donald was taking all sorts of credit for, look at your 401ks. Look at your. By the way, don't look at your 401k, please.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to be doing wellness checks on people tomorrow, but it was Market Watch, I believe, that did a study that showed actually almost drew a dollar for dollar correlation between the type of I'll call it the stealth quantitative easing that has been taking place in the last year of the Trump regime in the run-up right before Corona, because it's been happening all along, folks. This is just an explosion of it. The very quantitative easing that, by the way, that was decried by Republicans in the Tea Party and was one of the reasons for the Tea Party's existence, has been blowing up the stock market. So when all of a sudden we see the stock market crumbling, actually right now the stock market is probably returning more closely to a true value for the underlying companies that are involved in these different indexes. Everything else has just been sheer fiction.
Yep.
And it's ugly.
It's ugly, and it kind of ties back into the what we were talking about earlier about the education system. Okay, because we're not taught this in public schools. We're not taught about this sort of illusion of money. Instead, public schools teach about a public system because that's what the teachers are invested in. The teachers are teaching the system that they work in. And, they're not even doing it intentionally. A lot of teachers, if you point it out to them, they won't even recognize it. But that's where hopefully this crisis brings us some relief in, it's a weakening of the public school system, not because we're actually weakening the public school system, because people are seeing how much better the alternatives work. And that's
we're exposing its flaws. So the $1 million question that we've essentially been running up to for the last hour, we as libertarians, we are at a moment. Again, on one hand, you've got a group of people who are saying, oh, this proves the libertarian philosophy is dead, that only government could have bailed us out. Where would the libertarians have been? You've also got folks in the Libertarian Party who are spending a lot of time in emotional investment in trying to minimize the severity of the crisis. You've also got elections. So from your perspective, so someone who's run for office and been through, you and I have been through a couple of bubbles together, all right? In taking into mind, of course, Larry Sharp's great, you don't have to win the argument approach. How, in your mind, do you think libertarians should discuss this with people in terms of what the movement stands for, what this proves, and what type of tenor of the conversation should take place?
So the first thing about it is we have to discuss it, okay? Relish the fact that our community is special, right? I mean, I'm looking through the list of people who are on here. Tom Mann is this guy who I know for both of us is sort of a figure clad in light with a race with an extended middle finger.
Oh yeah.
But there are all these guys in our community, and that's what makes this work for us, is that we're not alone in this. And especially now, it's so easy to feel alone because those who are trapped in our houses or whatever. The way that we get out and we do things together as libertarians, that's what makes us better. And, we talked earlier about the marketplace for ideas. Okay. The marketplace for ideas where we compete with Republicans and Democrats, that's one marketplace. But among libertarians, we have all these different ideas of what's the best way to do stuff. And it becomes a lot better. I know for me, I am a better libertarian. I am smarter because of the people in my friends list that I have active conversations with. And I appreciate that a lot. I'm a guy who I want to be as smart as I can. And it's hard because I'm not a particularly smart person, but I have really smart friends. And if I will shut up and listen to them, I can get smarter. But that's about the relationships that we have to have with each other as well. We have to keep our relationships strong at a time when it's kind of easy for us to be mad about a lot of things. Like, we're talking about this incessant thing about what's going to happen with the convention, stuff like that. We can't let things like that destroy the relationships that keep us strong. And those relationships are built on the fact that libertarians accept everybody. Okay? Doesn't matter who you are. Okay? We quoted Larry earlier, right? Larry Sharp has this great phrase. Libertarians say, if you want to be a Republican, fine, be as Republican as you want. Be a Democrat, be as Democrat as you want. Just don't tell anybody else that they have to live under your rules. We have always been accepting of a broad coalition of ideas. And it's the broad coalition of ideas that we need to hear so that we know what's actually going to work, because nobody in the United States has any idea what's going to truly work in this scenario, in this new Corona age that we live in. We don't know what the future is going to look like, but to quote the new Frozen movie, the newer Frozen movie, we have to do just the next right thing. Doing the next right thing, we can see that. We can see what the next right thing is. The next right thing for me, so I got a couple things right. I told you I am 2 days or a few days away from ending a 2-week I'm not infected. When that happens, country needs blood. Okay, I'm going to go out and donate blood. I'm a guy who can do that. Actually, it's funny because I wasn't able to donate blood for a long time because I'd been in England in 1986 when Chernobyl let loose. So I was banned from donating blood in the United States for 20 years. But all that being said, that's an aside. So that's something that the next right thing for me to do is to find a way to give back to my community. Okay, the director of development for Libertarian Party, Tara DeSisto, has a lot of experience working as in bars in Boston, which has a great bar scene. So the next right thing for her was to talk to a local restaurant bar and said, hey, I want to sponsor one of your people who's working there. I know that you guys aren't going to be having a lot of business, but I'd be happy to contribute X amount of dollars a week towards that person's salary so that you could keep them full time. That's the next right thing for her. We all have different groups of next right thing, but that's what we got to do, is find that next right thing and do it. And for libertarians, we get together, our community is so special, our relationships to each other are so tight. Those are the ways that we find the next right thing, is by having discussions, doing stuff like this, right? Tomorrow night, we're going to have a libertarian town hall, LPTV. It's going to be on the Libertarian Party Facebook page. We're going to have Dr. Peter Everett, an oncologist from Boston, Apollo Pizzell, who is the vice mayor of Copperton, Utah, a couple other people on, and we're going to talk about medical, healthcare, politics, all in this new Corona area with a libertarian bend on it. That's the sort of stuff that we need, is that we come together in this community, we have these conversations, we learn from each other, because this is the thing about it, this is the thing that binds us to each other, is that we only have each other right now. And, you know, I know Abraham Lincoln can be controversial at times among libertarians, but I remember those mighty words, dedicated to a proposition that all men are created equal. We are here gathered to make sure that a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. It will perish. This American experiment will perish right now in this crisis if libertarians don't stand up and fight for this idea that we can govern ourselves, this novel idea. You know, I complained earlier saying, you know, I'm not happy. America is the freest country in the world, but I don't want to be freest. I want to be free. But I'm going to fight for being freest right now. I don't want to see that change. You know, I see the Department of Justice asking the Congress to suspend the Fifth Amendment, which is insane, right? Congress can't suspend an amendment. Excuse me. That's not Corona, folks. That's just a little cough. All of those things, though, that if we don't do it, if our community doesn't fight for it, it's going to go away. And so I am asking every libertarian, find a way to do the next right thing. But don't do it by yourself either, because we got to build it. We got to keep this community strong. We got to find a relationship. Find your libertarian BFF, and together do the next right thing. Because together we get a lot of stuff done. That's my emotional plea to the Libertarian Party.
God bless you, Dan. God bless you. I don't know if I could have said it as succinctly. These are moments when we need to step up. This is the A game. This is time. If we don't step up now, then the greater tragedy will have been the risk of losing even what we've got left. And then the other tragedy, of course, is opportunities lost. And not opportunities for our own personal profit, because I know of no one in this party who realizes anything resembling personal profit, power, or personal gain by doing this. We are the folks that occasionally feel like we're chasing windmills. And so the opportunity is to bring something out of the tragedy. And if it's a reemergence and a re-recognition of, again, the contributing factors that make America excellent, then I will never draw a moral equivalence between that and a loss of life. But I'll say, at least, damn it, we honored those who we lost because of this. And it's time for us all to well, as the swarmy saying goes, suck it up, Buttercup. Let's put aside personal differences, go into this election on all cylinders. This is the most important election in our lifetime. And I could say that when I've never said that before, and I could say it with absolute confidence. If we don't use this opportunity to promote the core mission, our statement of principles, I do fear all is lost. Because clearly there are people out there right now who are not letting an opportunity go to waste. And there are people aggressively in ways that were scoffed at for bringing up just a few years ago, who are aggressively pursuing the elimination of significant portions of our civil liberties within weeks, not years, not months, not after losing millions of lives. As important as those lives that have been lost already, they represent a fraction of the potential death toll of either this or future situations like this. But if we can't stem this now, if we can't put a stop and call out those individuals and those political organizations that would personally profit from this, I fear all is lost. And that's my emotional plea. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. I know you've got a lot on your plate. We're going to get this out to people.
Always
right
a pleasure.
Folks, if I could just take a moment and thank our sponsors, airsciences.net, Daryl Gould, a libertarian who sometimes tries to portray himself as a Democrat. That's a Rhode Island joke. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, beaconshippingandlogistics.com. They ship automobiles around the world. They're based here right in Little Rhodey, and they sponsor controversial stuff like this. And, of course, Yacht Club Soda, Yacht Club Bottling Works, the finest soda on the planet. Folks, we're sponsor-driven media, just like everybody else is, and a lot of our sponsors are in tough times. So we've got on the Coalition Radio Network page a couple different ways. If the spirit moves you in the coming weeks to contribute a little, and I mean just a tiny bit, we appreciate it. But we will be here throughout this and going forward to use this podium, if you will, to promote libertarian ideals. We'll cover lots of other issues. We talk about this media as being sort of something that covers third rail politics, all the issues that no one wants to talk about. But we'd appreciate it, number one, if you could follow us on the Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. If you could follow us on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio. And if you could take a moment to follow us and listen to some of the things we have to say. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. Be safe, and we're sure to be talking to you very soon. Have a great night.